Tropical storm Rita with 70-mile-per-hour winds is expected to become a Category 1 or even 2 hurricane sometime tomorrow as it comes closer to the
2005, the most active hurricane season in U.S. history. A record 28 named storms developed that year. The devastation left behind was simply astonishing. Towns leveled, lives ripped apart. Many of us were directly impacted by the fury of Hurricane Rita. Coming on the heels of Katrina, Rita is often regarded as the forgotten hurricane. But Southeast Texans will never forget how one storm managed to turn the entire world upside down. Nearly a decade has passed since Rita ravaged the area. In the meantime, 2 other hurricanes have taken their toll. Umberto made a quick appearance in 2007, then Ike followed in 2008. As long as we reside along the Texas Gulf Coast, hurricanes will always be a true reality. With 2015 being the 10-year anniversary of one of the worst hurricanes to impact Southeast Texas, we remember the past as a way to prepare for the future. Hurricane season has now officially begun. Are you ready?
12 News presents Hurricane Horizons 2015. Brought to you by Monica Brothers, your one-stop auto shop, and Leak Sealers Environmental. We keep you up and running in the event of a natural disaster.
I'm 12 News First Alert Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Patrick Vaughn.
And I'm meteorologist Jeff Gerber.
And I'm meteorologist David Walter. Another hurricane season has begun. Here is what you need to know before the next storm comes barreling our way.
Hurricane season may start June 1st and end November 30th. But 2015 has already proven that tropical systems are not confined to a specific season. Tropical Storm Ana, which made landfall near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina on May 10th, was one of the earliest storms to impact the United States in recent history. Over the next few months, our eyes will continue to remain glued to the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. Now, there is always uncertainty with what might happen, but there's one thing we can all be assured of. We must be ready.
Assume you're going to get nailed this season and just do most of your preparations before the season starts, having like just water and non-perishables stocked up and stuff like that, and just having a plan.
With hurricane season 2015 now officially underway, here is what you can expect. The official forecast from Colorado State University calls for 7 named storms with 3 hurricanes and 1 major hurricane. This is well below the average season, which typically consists of 12 named storms with 6 hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes.
For the general public, we put these forecasts out basically just as public awareness, so people want to know how active you think the season's going to be. But these forecasts are for the Atlantic Basin as a whole. They're not for any specific location along the coastline.
And that is one of the many reasons why the early season forecast should never dictate how you prepare for this or any other hurricane season.
Don't get distracted by all of the talk about seasonal forecasts and going into a less active era, or what has or has not happened in your area over the last year or 10 years or 50 years. Realize that it could happen to you this year.
The reality is, even if we're only talking about less than 10 storms, if one of those 10 storms hits your community, it's a big deal.
Some Southeast Texans, especially those who lived around Houston in 1983, know about Alicia. A powerful Category 3 hurricane that left tens of thousands of residents homeless. The storm was the worst to hit Texas since Carla in 1961, but it was just one of 4 named storms to develop in 1983. That means parts of Houston suffered extensive destruction in one of the quietest hurricane seasons on record.
There's a huge difference between how busy overall a hurricane season can be in the Atlantic, Gulf, and Caribbean, and how bad it can be where you live. You could be impacted this year by wind or water or both, worse than you ever had, even in a below average year if that's the way it turns out.
And let's not forget, it's not just the major hurricanes that do the most damage. Some Category 1 hurricanes and even tropical storms have taken their toll. When Tropical Storm Allison slowly drifted around East and Southeast Texas in 2001, rain came down in buckets. Flooding in Houston was some of the worst the city had ever seen. When all was said and done, Allison caused nearly $9 billion in damage, making it the costliest tropical storm in U.S. history.
Another thing you have to worry about in our part of the world is you don't even need a hurricane. You need a fairly large, wet tropical disturbance come in and stall and dump 20 to 30 inches of rain. on you or even north of you, and the Nueces River floods and you have all the problems with flooding, and that's how we lose a lot of our lives here.
Inland flooding is the one that people often least think about and least respect, and a lot of people die in their cars. And that's why this phrase, turn around, don't drown, is really good advice. And so you really need to heed the flash flood watches and warnings that come out from a local weather service forecast office when any strength, depression, storm, hurricane, major hurricane, is affecting your area.
Over the last 10 years, we've experienced 3 hurricanes, each one different in its own way. The furious wind of Rita devastated parts of southeast Texas, but it was the storm surge that caused the most damage in southwest Louisiana. In 2007, Umberto may not have caused the most destruction, but it was unique in how quickly it developed. In fact, it was the quickest developing Atlantic hurricane prior to landfall in history. And exactly 1 year after Umberto, Ike proved that the worst weather is not always near the eye of the storm. After the break, we'll take you back to 2008 and recognize some of the heroes who risked their lives to rescue those stranded in Bridge City during Hurricane Ike.
But first, since 2015 is the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Rita, let's see what you really know about this monster storm. Where does Rita rank amongst the strongest hurricanes in Atlantic history? The answer after the break.
Hurricane Horizons 2015 is brought to you by Monica Brothers, your one-stop auto shop, and Leak Sealers Environmental. We keep you up and running in the event of a natural disaster.
We're back with the answer to your Rita trivia question. Where does Rita rank amongst the strongest hurricanes in Atlantic history? At one point, Rita was a massive Category 5 hurricane with winds estimated around 180 miles per hour. The central pressure was an astonishing 895 millibars, making it the 4th strongest Atlantic hurricane on record. This milestone occurred when Rita was located approximately 570 miles from Galveston Island. Thankfully, the storm weakened to Category 3 strength upon landfall on September 24, 2005. In 2008, Hurricane Ike served as another reminder of how vulnerable we are to hurricanes. The memories from that fateful September day are still fresh in one hometown. Now, the floodwaters may have devastated Bridge City, but they could not destroy the spirit of the Bridge City Volunteer Fire Department. The eye of Hurricane Ike rolls over Galveston Island at 2 a.m. on September 13, 2008. 80 miles from the center of the storm is Bridge City, and without anything separating the city from Sabine Lake other than marshland, the water rushed right in. But so did the Bridge City volunteer firefighters. Now, before we move forward, let's step back 12 hours. September 12th, the Bridge City Fire Department is in Jasper waiting for Ike to arrive. The original plan was to travel back to Bridge City around daybreak the following morning, but because the water was rising so quickly, their services were needed much earlier than anticipated. It was around midnight the calls for help started to come in. At that point, it was time to spring into action.
We started getting phone calls around midnight, and we all sat down and decided time to go back. So as the storm was going that way, we was coming this way.
When the crew finally arrived in Bridge City, it would only take a few hours before daylight brought light on the true magnitude of the situation.
I've been here full time since 1970, and we know people have been here 70, 80, 90 years and never saw anything like that before. Hope we never do again either.
We're used to seeing streets. All we was seeing was waterways, and it's unbelievable.
95% of the city was underwater. Of the roughly 3,800 homes in Bridge City, only about 16 were able to escape the floodwaters.
Everybody had water. It was a shared situation, and it was not, wasn't nothing you can do about it but just deal with it.
The extent of the flooding was unprecedented. Water was up to 12 feet deep in some homes. Several residents were left stranded on rooftops. Firefighter Dave Stankus says the hardest part of the entire rescue operation was having to rescue children.
It's just rough, especially the kids. The kids was the real problem. They shouldn't have been here.
The firefighters may have been thrown into pure chaos, but as time wore on, everyone knew what they had to do to get the job done. Thankfully, Bridge City was not alone in all of this. They received assistance from fire departments across the country.
We just stuck together, worked together, helped each other through it. And believe me, we had a lot of help from these other volunteer fire departments and stuff, you know, from everywhere in Texas. And that was a great deal of help.
We divided the town up into four slices, and people had to go. You know, we had a lot of mutual aid people. We had people all the way from Long Beach, California, and all up around Dallas and up that way. And people just divided and took off and did their thing. They came down to help us spend a week or so at a time.
After several days, the water would eventually recede, but the destruction remained clear. Homes were full of debris and mud, all of which were total losses. But what could never be lost in all of this were the heroic efforts made by a few brave individuals.
It gave you a complete appreciation for the people that you were with, and knowing that guys that had to go to work and they'd come back and come help while they could, but then they had to go work on their house. You know, I mean, it was everybody had to. I mean, it wasn't just one or two people. It was everybody. We all had the same problem.
It's a tight department. Everybody gets along, and we just do our job.
And job well done. These are the heroes of the storm that brought a new meaning to the phrase "come hell or high water." After the break, we introduce you to another local hero who had the job of caring for hospital patients while Hurricane Rita unleashed her fury on southeast Texas.
Hurricane Horizons 2015 is brought to you by Monica Brothers, your one-stop auto shop, and Leak Sealers Environmental. We keep you up and running in the event of a natural disaster.
A hurricane can be a huge headache for anyone in harm's way. From the evacuation to the aftermath, it's a stressful situation no one wants to endure. Of course, in the event of a natural disaster, there are certain people who can help us get back on our feet. Here I introduce you to a local doctor who took care of hospital patients while Rita declared war on the outside world. A hurricane is churning in the Gulf of Mexico, and southeast Texas is in the crosshairs. Evacuations are ordered, and residents must begin the rush out of town. This was the real-life situation back in 2005, and while many were able to get out, there were some who had to stay behind. Dr. Doug Wilcox is a Beaumont resident and physician at Christus Preventive Medicine of Southeast Texas. He had to help care for those patients who could not be evacuated during Hurricane Rita.
Saney tried to evacuate most of the patients from the hospital, but by Friday afternoon, I think there were probably 50 or 60 patients left that they were unable to evacuate, and so they had to ride out the storm.
In the hours before Rita finally roared on shore during the early morning of September 24th, 2005, Wilcox and his family took shelter at the Christus Hospital St. Elizabeth Cancer Treatment Facility. Hurricane force winds may have been ripping through the streets that night, but Wilcox was confident everyone would make it safely through the very worst Mother Nature had to offer.
I can't say I was really concerned. We were in a very strong structure that, you know, if it's 200-mile-an-hour winds, okay, we're all level, but I didn't see that happening.
Daybreak Saturday morning, the very worst of Hurricane Rita had moved out, and the destruction was becoming apparent. Trees and power lines down for as far as the eye could see. Now, the hospital was running on generator power. However, due to some other concerns, medical personnel made a decision to transport the remaining patients to Houston.
Saney had 50 or 60 patients, and they had to really evacuate them. I know they had some power, but there was a concern about sanitation and water. They decided to go to St. Joseph's Hospital in Houston, and so they just had many ambulances come, drive up in the front of Saney, and they would load the patients in the ambulance, and just had a big trek going to Houston.
While in Houston, Dr. Wilcox attended to patients through the weekend. By Monday, September 26th, he had completed his service, but since there was so much damage back home in Beaumont, he decided to keep his family in the Houston area while he worked to help St. Elizabeth resume operations.
One physician would come to the hospital for a 24-hour shift, like 7 in the morning to the next 7 in the morning, and just see folks that are kind of coming through the emergency room, and then just spend the night in the hospital, and then the next morning somebody would relieve you, and I would drive back to where we were near Kemah.
Rita was a true test for anyone in the medical field. For Dr. Wilcox, this was not his first experience with hurricane victims. In fact, a few weeks prior to Rita, he worked to assist Katrina refugees who were temporarily housed at Ford Park.
A lot of the patients were people from New Orleans ended up going out to Ford Park, and they had a staging area out there, and they needed medical people to come help. And so we provided some medical service. I went out there a couple times, couple shifts, just seeing folks that were kind of displaced.
In the weeks following Hurricane Rita, residents and hospital patients alike returned to a new sense of normalcy. Beaumont had changed forever, and it was the caretakers who were still there to help start the healing process.
Everybody just does what needs to be done, and I think that speaks very highly for really just all the medical people.
Up next, we will investigate how Southeast Texas is designed to keep the water out, even as the storm rolls in.
Hurricane Horizons 2015 is brought to you by Monica Brothers, your one-stop auto shop, and Leak Sealers Environmental. We keep you up and running in the event of a natural disaster.
When you have to evacuate from a hurricane, you must leave your home and most of your possessions behind. At this point, there's a lot of uncertainty with what might happen. What will you discover when you return? Will everything be fine, or will we be picking up the pieces? Is there even a way to truly protect Southeast Texas from a hurricane? There are a lot of questions, but the answer may be located all around us. Since hurricanes are the greatest threat to Southeast Texas, how have we been able to change our landscape in order to keep the wrath of Mother Nature at bay? The answer lies in an advanced levee system that outlines parts of Jefferson and Orange County. The levee system around southern Jefferson County alone is 35 miles, beginning in Port Neches and ending near the Jack Brooks Regional Airport.
We spend 365 days a year virtually maintaining that system. Not only the hurricane flood protection levee, but all of the pump stations and the inner canal system, drainage system.
12 pumping stations are situated along the levee system, with a 13th to be constructed at Alligator Bayou. Funded through FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, this $60 million project is expected to be completed late spring of 2017.
As a result of a master drainage study that was done or completed back in 2002, one of the recommended improvements was to add some additional pumping capacity out there. Not only additional capacity, but also what we call a low flow pump system.
Now, a big problem facing the city of Orange today is the overall height of the current Sabine River levee. It is just too low. The 6 to 8 foot storm surge of Ike was easily able to overtop the levee. At that point, the pumping station became overwhelmed with water and ultimately rendered useless.
Normally, the water is held back on the river side of the levee, and then what is captured on the land side or the town side of the levee is what the pumps normally pump over the levee or into the river. Once that was overtopped, like it was during Hurricane Ike, it was a sea of water, so there was no sense in running the station. It would have served no purpose.
Now, there is a chance the levee could be raised if a land study conducted by the Army Corps of Engineers determines the upgrade to be necessary.
We're really limited until the Corps comes up with a new plan for a new major levee whose elevation would be much greater than elevation 8. And I think they may be looking at elevation 12 or elevation even 14.
Without funding currently available to elevate the Sabine River levee, Orange is still fairly vulnerable to a landfalling hurricane. Even so, City Engineer James Wolf believes they are best prepared to handle the next big storm.
I think we are. We went through a learning curve in the last 8 to 10 years that we've encountered the 2 hurricanes, the one in 05 and the other one in 08. We know from a infrastructure standpoint what we need to do.
Right now, there are no levees in far south Jefferson and Orange counties. That is why flooding during Hurricane Ike was so extensive in those areas. At Sabine Pass, a storm surge over 12 feet basically wiped this small community off the map. The worst flooding in Orange County occurred when Gulf waters were forced through Sabine Lake and into southern parts of the county. This left 95% of Bridge City underwater. Without any protection, Gulf waters are simply pushed onshore without much resistance. So what can be done to help prevent these flooding disasters in the future? The key is to restore our natural levees, the coastal dune system.
We've had a study jointly with the Texas General Land Office in Jefferson County and Parks and Wildlife. We've done a study of offshore sand sources that can be used to nourish the beach and sustain the dune system.
No matter what we do, it is impossible to completely protect our cities from the full wrath of Mother Nature. The only real way to protect our livelihood is to get out of harm's way.
Here at 12 News, we have all the information you need to keep you and your family safe this hurricane season. You can track any tropical activity on 12newsnow.com. Simply go to Weather and click Hurricane Headquarters on the pull-down menu.
Additional preparation tips can be found in one of our hurricane guides. Inside, you'll find a full list of supplies you need, as well as information about what to do when a storm is coming your way. You can pick up a guide from KBMT or one of these proud sponsors.
Social media is one of the best forms of communication, especially if the power goes out. Make sure to like us on Facebook and follow @FirstAlert12 and @12NewsSETX on Twitter. Over the last decade, we have been impacted by 3 hurricanes, each with their own story. For us, it's not a matter of if another storm will strike, but when.
Regardless of what the preseason forecast says, the past has taught us to never underestimate the power of Mother Nature.
We've learned many valuable lessons since Hurricane Rita made landfall in 2005. Lessons that will get us better prepared before the next storm is on the horizon.
Hurricane Horizons 2015 is brought to you by Monica Brothers, your one-stop auto shop, and Leak Sealers Environmental. We keep you up and running in the event of a natural disaster.